to them gates in Weston, supposedly.
Oh,
Ron,
Jay,
testing,
call you
1,
back.
2, 3.
I'm on speaker. All right, I'll call you back later. Hello?
Ron, can you hear us?
Yes, sorry about that. I have my phone next to the speaker. So yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Hopefully you guys can hear my conversation.
Only half of it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How are you, sir? Good.
You know, Bill came down with COVID this morning. That's why I'm wearing a mask again. No, he's gonna be on Zoom. You guarantee all the germs you spread are not in the room. I'm wearing my mask.
Everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, Mayor, we can.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started then. We'll call to order if we could. Everyone ready?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. We'd like to call to order the budget workshop and presentation for August 16th, 2023 at 7:01 PM. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Drosky,
Here?
Commissioner Hudak,
Here.
Commissioner Preston,
Here.
Vice Mayor Parnas,
Here.
Mayor Gans.
Here. If we could all please stand for a moment of silence and our pledge of allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I apologize for not being there tonight. Obviously, I'm not feeling well, and Commissioner Parnas is really good to give my prognosis, so I'm very grateful for his conversation on the mic. Thank you so much for that, Bernie. I appreciate it.
Not a
We have
problem.
approval of our agenda tonight for August 16th, 2023.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Preston, seconded by Vice Mayor Parnas. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, Mr. City Attorney, or excuse me, Madam Clerk.
For those attending via Zoom, online, wishing to speak under public comment or on an item that's open for public input, please click raise hand at the bottom under the reactions tab, and your audio will be unmuted when you are recognized by Mayor Gans. For those attending via Zoom by telephone, please press *9 to raise your hand, and your audio will be unmuted when you are recognized by Mayor Gans. Please make sure your audio is unmuted on your end by pressing *6. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, City Commission, members of the public, and staff in attendance. I'm pleased to present to you this evening with an overview of the FY24 proposed budget. Back on June 13th and 14th, the city held 2 days worth of budget workshops with the commission and the public to provide staff level input into the budget requests that they had, as well as receive input from the commission and from the public in relation to the service levels in which the city commission would like to see the city operate at, as well as various expenditures that they had expectations on and requests from departments in order for them to provide levels of service on the various operations in which they provide We also provided a capital project overview, providing the city commission with the 5-year CIP and the various projects in the various funds, to include the general fund, the utility fund, stormwater fund, solid waste fund, and the ways in which we planned on pursuing those particular large-scale capital projects. Since that time, we have been revising and refining the budget in order to provide you with the balanced budget for FY24, the budget recommendation that is before you. During that time, many things have occurred. We have seen some cost increases in some places. We have had to reduce the budget in other places in order to provide you today with the document that you have before you. I will spend time going through those changes, making sure that you are aware of what has transpired since June. Additionally, after the budget workshops, I had the opportunity to meet with each of you individually and get further input from you into your perceptions of the workshops themselves, the line item details that were provided within those department level discussions, and with that collective feedback, provide you with the budget that's before you today. The budget was provided to you on August 11th of just a few days ago. And along with that, the budget transmittal letter. I did provide to you separately the budget transmittal letter, as I believe it's a very important document for the commission to read and understand, to get a high level understanding of the budget initiatives that are contained within this obviously very detailed and large budget that we have. The statutory requirement to provide the budget to the city commission is August 15th. And I commend staff on being able to beat that deadline. They have, continuously made improvements to the process, the financial process, the budget process, in order to become more efficient and effective in beating deadlines, as we have seen with just this year with the ACFR, which is the annual consolidated financial report for fiscal year 2022, where we did not have any findings this year as well. So we continue to see improvements in the financial operations of the city. Today is obviously August 16th. I'm here to present the FY24 budget. We're going to be giving a presentation at a high level of the proposed budget, and as well as discussing the millage rate as proposed back in June, which is still consistent with what we recommended back in June. It also will go into discussion about the fire assessment rate, consistent with the discussions that we had last month in the preliminary rate hearing for the fire assessment. And we'll do some revenue and expenditure overview at the fund level. This is not a workshop in which, or a meeting in which the commission will take action on the budget. This is a workshop to present that information. I look forward to your additional feedback that you may have. The time to take action on the budget would be for first reading of September 5th and second reading on September 13th, which included with the second reading of the budget would be the passage of the fire assessment fee and a nuisance abatement assessment. Next slide, please. When preparing the budget, we looked at our strategic priorities to guide us and how we provide service levels for our citizens. We looked at the key strategic priorities of our customer care and customer service, modernization of our infrastructure and our processes, fiscal accountability and transparency, and sustainability and eco-friendly environment. And why is that important? Because the strategic plan that we are rolling out here within the next month or so to the city commission, to the public, includes the collective collaboration of the public through surveys, interviews with the city commission, and several meetings with staff to develop our strategic plan. And these were the priorities that the public said were important to them in moving the city forward. All of this is commensurated with the city's core values, which stand for SHARP. What does SHARP mean? Service, honesty, accountability, respect, and professionalism. These are the values of the city's workforce. And these are the values that allow us to provide the level of service and the customer care to the residents and businesses of Deerfield Beach that I expect, that you expect, and that our staff expects. I want to talk a little bit about the residential property values. A lot of this information in the next couple of slides has been provided previously, but when we do this back in June, we have the preliminary numbers and then we have the revised July numbers. And so we do updates on this information and then provide it back to you. The average assessed value for Deerfield Beach in 2022, the average assessed value was $236,448. This year, it increased approximately 11%. Broward County's average assessed value last year was $322,054. The county average increased about 10%. So we're outpacing the county as a whole, which means all 31 municipalities in unincorporated Broward County. But you can see that our average assessed values still lag behind the county average by approximately $92,000 on a single family property. The good news is that in the past, we were the 11th lowest assessed value in the county. We've ticked up a notch to the 11th lowest assessed value in the county. So that is good news for us. It does show a little bit of economic progress. What I'm seeing throughout the county is that, generally speaking, the municipalities that have the lowest or have historically had the lowest assessed values are creeping up faster than the rest of the county, simply because there's capacity for growth within those communities, and where other communities are more affluent, they've already kind of reached the maximum of market value on home values. So that's what we're experiencing here in Deerfield Beach in some areas. This next slide is a little busy, so I'm going to take some time to go over it and make sure that you and the public understand what we're trying to show here. So there's a couple things on this slide that we're showing. First, in the light blue bar, those are the number of home parcels in each of these municipalities that we have provided for as a comparison. So light blue bar is the number of home parcels that are in each municipality. And the key for that is on the right-hand side. So as an example, we'll use the closest one to that key, City of Fort Lauderdale. They have approximately over 35,000 home parcels, right? They also have approximately, we'll say somewhere between 30 and 25,000 number of condo parcels, right? So those are the number of parcels in terms of homes and condos. And obviously there's a taxable value associated with each one of those that contributes to that city's ability to raise revenues in order to provide the level of service that their residents require. The line graphs, okay, the gray one is the average taxable value for homes. That's the gray one. And then obviously the yellow one is the average taxable value for condos. So why are we showing this information? Because you can see a correlation here in relation to the property values in these communities and the amount of tax revenue that they're able to generate based off the number of parcels that they have. So as an example, the city of Deerfield Beach, we have approximately maybe 15,000 home parcels. We have more condo parcels than we do home parcels in the city of Deerfield Beach. Yet, you can see how low the condo average taxable value is. So we have more condos, but less value in those condos. And the same holds true in some cases for our average home taxable value. You can see the cities who outpace us in the average home values as well. And this relates to our ability to raise revenues through ad valorem taxes. Any questions on that slide? Understand? Okay, great, thank you.
David, I do have one question if I could.
Yes.
It is in relation to slide 4, which I believe is the previous slide.
Yes.
You said that when it comes to comparison, we were 11th previously in our millage rate, and you said we're still at 11. And you said that was an improvement, and I'm trying to figure out what happened there.
If I said millage rate, Mayor, I apologize. What I meant to say is assessed values of
No, I'm
homes.
sorry. Assessed value, you said we were 11th previously, and the good news is we've ticked up a notch and we're at 11th now. So I was just trying to understand that. Where do we fall?
We were 10th previously for many years, and currently we're 11th. So we did tick up one notch.
All right. Thank you.
I did say 11. I apologize. So yes, we were 10th previously. So in years past, we were the 10th lowest. Thank you. Here on this side, this is a depiction, just a picture of a home. But you can see that this home is sliced up in several different ways, and it's meant to represent where your taxes go. And so you can see here that the city of Deerfield Beach represents about a third of the property taxes that any parcel, single family home, condo, business, will pay in the city of Deerfield Beach. We are not the only taxing authority on your tax bill. There is also taxes paid to the North Broward Hospital District, Broward County, the South Florida Water Management District, the School Board of Broward County, and the Children's Services Council. So you can see here that about a third of that is your total tax millage rate here for the city of Deerfield Beach is 20.7 mils, but the city's taxes make up only 6.2538 of that total millage. So when you get your tax bill, a lot of people immediately believe that, you know, it's that entire tax value is going to the city. That's not the case. There are many other taxing districts within the county that each parcel is paying taxes towards.
Question?
Yes.
You notice that we pay the county water tax, yet we have our own wells. Is that because some of the section that used to be Pompano has water from the county rather than from wells?
Yes. So ad valorem taxes bring in revenues into the general fund.
Right.
But what you're talking about is water and wastewater services. That-
That's different.
Correct.
Okay.
That reside within the utility fund.
Okay.
Yes, it is true that there are residents in the city who are on the city water system, and then there are residents in the city who are on the county water system.
Okay.
Thank you. So comparison of the millage rate over the past 2 years. The recommendation within this budget, as we discussed in June, is to maintain the operating millage rate at 6.0018. Also, whenever the city goes out to the voters for voter approved debt, which was done back in 2012 and then in 2000 as well, there's voter approved debt that's also attached to the millage rate. And you can see those numbers for FY23 and FY24. As you continue to pay down that debt and your property values increase, typically you'll see that that millage, the portion of the millage rate associated with debt decrease. And that's what we've been seeing year over year. So the total millage rate for the residents of Deerfield Beach is in fact going down this year. And it's going from 6.2825 to 6.2538. So there is a overall millage decrease for the city of Deerfield Beach. And this is just a graphic depicting what I just said, which is a steady decrease in the millage rate over the past 10 or so years. And you can see that millage rate decrease. You can see the millage rate legend there at the bottom. The millage rate is lower this year than it was before. But again, this is just a depiction from a graphical standpoint of the millage rate over time. Yes, Commissioner.
And I think that's an important point that you make. Slide 6, the home is a very important slide that I think our residents need to completely understand. only 30% of your taxes go to the city. The other 70% go to other entities. So when the school board of Broward County asks voters to increase the millage rate for different products and programs, and the voters say, sure, let's do that, your taxes do go up. But that does not mean that it's the city that increased your taxes. In this instance, the voters approved a millage increase for the school board of Broward County last November. And that's why your taxes may have gone up. Also, your home value, as your home value goes up, your taxes will increase. And that's just economics, and increasing home values is actually a good thing. And I understand there are people that are on a fixed income that they're concerned, but the taxes that the city control, we are actually reducing the millage rate. Things that are outside of our control, the value of your home, other entities, whether it is the hospital district, whether it is the school board, they also have the ability to increase your millage rate, therefore increasing your taxes. So I want to make sure individuals understand that. Thank you.
On this next slide, we're showing current versus proposed operating millage rates for cities that we are comparing ourselves to, consistent throughout this slide presentation. So as you can see, you have most cities remaining the same. You see the city of Tamarack having an increase in their millage rate. I will tell you that overall across the county, looking at it, there are 5 cities increasing their millage rate this year. There are 2 cities lowering their millage rate this year, and the county is also increasing their millage rate this year. So the increase in the millage rate from last year may be associated, for a resident, may be associated with the Broward County millage rate increase. Another slide comparison to try to bridge and understand the difference between an operating millage rate and taxable values. I showed you that slide earlier. We showed the number of home parcels and taxable values for those cities. Well, here you can see the overall taxable value, which is depicted on the legend on the right-hand side, along with the line graph. And then the operating millage rates for those cities depicted in the legend on the left-hand side on the bar graphs. So as a very clear example, you take the one all the way to the left, city of Fort Lauderdale has very high taxable value, which means and translates to a lower millage rate somewhere just above 4 mils, right? So they're bringing in approximately, I think it's, I don't have the exact number here, but I think it's about 53 billion in taxable value. And so their millage rate, they're able to keep their millage rate around 4%. So conversely, you can see the city of Deerfield Beach, we have lower taxable value. And I think it's around, I'll have it on another slide. I believe it's about 12 billion. Our taxable values, and our millage rate, again, on the operating side is 6.0018. And if you look at the consistency of what we're talking about here across the different cities, you can see we're not far off in the grand scheme of things in terms of millage rate comparison.
Dave, I have a question if I could.
Yes.
Go back to slide 9, if we could. So looking at this, one of the things we hear from residents is say, oh, we had the highest millage rate around. Now, all of these cities here have a fire assessment fee, I would imagine. All of them have a utility tax. All of them have stormwater fees. All the same fees we have. Would that be accurate?
I believe so. Most of these, I will have a slide comparison of fire assessment fees, and I believe that you'll be able to see on there. Yes, most municipalities do have the same fees that we do. I can't be certain that every one of these has, yes, they're going to have a utility enterprise. Most are going to have a stormwater fee as well. And they're also going to have a revenue source for their solid waste as well. But again, we're pretty unique in the fact that we are our own hauler. So they may have a different way in which they generate revenues to cover that cost.
Okay, and looking at this slide here, I see that we have a lower operating millage rate than Coconut Creek, a lower one than Coral Springs, a one that is lower than Sunrise, but yet you look at Pompano, and Pompano's at 527, but I believe on the next page, you kind of explain that on page 10. Can you go to that? Can you explain maybe this will help clarify with the chart with our closest neighbor, why they're able to have such a lower millage rate than us?
That's correct, Mayor. You can see on the line graph that their taxable values are somewhere around, looks to be about maybe 18 billion.
Okay,
And we're, much higher than ours.
okay, thank you.
Okay, now going into the calculation of ad valorem property tax collection. So citywide, the city anticipates of bringing in approximately 61,860,000 in estimated collections based on the millage rate, and corresponds obviously to ad valorem tax revenue. However, we have to make some deductions there, and those deductions are within the CRA, where the CRA contribution will be 2.64 million. So the projected net general fund tax collection for FY24, based off of the proposed millage rate, is 59,222,000. So 59.22 million. Want to note that 1 mil generates approximately $9.9 million in ad valorem tax revenue for the city, which is a revenue source for the general fund. And the net increase in taxable values is approximately 10.8% or $10.4 billion. So here is a graphical depiction of the ad valorem tax revenue over time. We're estimating approximately a 10.8% increase in ad valorem tax revenue this year. And you can see the steady increase over time. As of late, we've had more increases in taxable value that we've all kind of experienced here in the South Florida area. And so you see a little bit steeper of an incline over the past couple of years over previous years. But again, the net ad valorem tax revenue that we anticipate is $59.22 million.
Dave, I have a quick question, if we could, back to that.
Yes.
Obviously, we're seeing this property tax projection increase, which is great for us. But for people that are homesteaded, even if their values might quadruple, the maximum they can go up is 3% or what is equal to CPI. Is that correct?
Yep. That is correct.
Okay.
Talked a little bit earlier about fire assessment fees, and I found this pretty interesting. I haven't seen this in quite some time when we've done fire assessment fee comparisons, but we are seeing significant increases from many cities on their fire assessment fees. And so you can see that here. The one thing I want to note, one of the things I want to note is this is information directly from the Broward County property appraiser. And so when we did our preliminary rate resolution that we provided to the property appraiser, which was capped at $324, that's what they received. So that's the information that you see here. And we talked about other fire assessment fee rates during that presentation, but the resolution that was passed by the City Commission was at that 324. You'll make your final recommendation and determination at the second reading in September, which I believe is September 13th. You can't go higher than 324. You can go lower. So that's why it says 324 here. But you can see significant increases in fire assessment fees across the board, just looking at, places like Tamarack, Miramar significantly, Lauderhill, Davie. Many cities are doing increases on their fire assessment fees to contain the costs or to not contain the costs, excuse me, to keep up with the costs of service to provide fire rescue services in their communities. I do not, I don't have any information of how they were able to do that. It could be based off of a lot of times when you do a new study, you have, as we saw in the last fire assessment study that we did, if you have fluctuations in the way in which fire services are provided to residents versus business or institutional, excuse me, you may have shifts in the costs to those various categories. So they may have, I'm just guessing here, they may have done an updated study and found that there was more pressure on the fire services from the commercial side of the municipality and less on the resident. So there may have been more cost shift to the commercial and institutional rather than the resident. That could be one factor. I can't say for sure, but that's something that we experience when we update our fire assessment studies every 3 to 4 years. So that could have potentially happened. The other thing could have been maybe they weren't charging for institutional before and they made the decision to charge for institutional. Again, just some scenarios that could have had that impact, but I couldn't say for sure. This slide here, we talked about this in June, and at that time we were seeing inflation at about 9.9% locally. Nationally, it's lower, but here in South Florida, inflation remains high. And for the first time, and this comes out when they do it on a regional basis, when they do the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Palm Beach market, and they provide the CIP, that's done on a quarterly basis. It's not done monthly like the national CIP. But so we get this on a quarterly basis. On the last one, we did see this fall, and that's good. And it's the first time we've seen it fall, and you can see for a very long time, because this is a 3-year average. But inflation still remains high, and we have had to absorb significant cost increases across the board as it relates to the services that we need in order to provide our services to the city. And we're going to go into those increases on the next slide. So here are some service level increases and pressures that we've had on the budget this year that we've had to absorb. And so first, you can see that we've had a $2.3 million increase in law enforcement contractual services. That's in the consideration that we received from the Broward Sheriff's Office. We've had a $2 million increase in the fire rescue contracted services that we received from the Broward Sheriff's Office. Included in that, and these two figures are higher than what we presented back in June, because in July, the state legislature passed a law that increased the employer contribution for FRS for public safety personnel and police and fire. And so we had an increase on this budget of approximately $1 million due to that legislation. And that is included within that 2.3 and that $2 million there. Also, to complete the implementation of the paying class study, as you remember, this was going to be a 2-year implementation phase. Did some of it in 23, and to complete it here in 24, it's a $1.6 million increase to complete the implementation of the paying class study. Remember, the paying class study found that our salaries, our wage rates were deficient by approximately 6% across the board. There were other recommendations in order to get us to the market, as we were seeing significant effects of the quote unquote great resignation and our ability to retain and recruit individuals. Our turnover rate was extremely high at the time. Our vacancy rate was very high at the time. It is getting better. I do notice that When I sit here in my monthly new hire meet and greets, I'm seeing more and more new faces, which is great. Very motivated individuals who are happy to be here and working for the city of Deerfield Beach. So I have great promise in what the paying class study accomplished, and I believe it's paying off. Additionally, within the utility fund, as we talked earlier, we were hit with, and this wasn't something that we knew back in June, but Broward County did a significant bond, and they are passing along to their large users, which we are for the wastewater portion. We don't provide our own wastewater, or not provide. We don't treat our own wastewater. That goes to the county, and they are passing along on an annual basis a $1 million cost to the city for the bond that they took out. So that was something that we did not anticipate. Additionally, in solid waste, we're anticipating approximately a $1 million increase in our disposal costs. That is a bid that we are currently drafting, and we will have that out on the street soon. So sometime this fall, we'll be coming back to the city commission with a new contract for our disposal fees. But that's the cost that we're anticipating within the solid waste fund. Additional cost increases that we're absorbing this year, $900,000 in property insurance. Last year's, that's the increase. The cost last year was $600,000. So it's a $900,000 increase on property insurance for the city of Deerfield Beach. That's significant. Also, we went out to bid on our janitorial services and our landscape maintenance services. We evaluated not only the scope of services, as we have heard from residents, and we've heard from the commission on levels of service that they'd like to see as it relates to cleanliness of our facilities, our public facilities, of course, our restrooms, our beach restrooms, so on and so forth, as well as the quality of the maintenance that's provided within our medians and where the contractual service for the landscape maintenance services is provided. So coupled that along with the increase in labor costs and other costs associated with providing these services, these are the increases that the city saw. So those are significant increases there as well. The contribution to the employee health insurance was a significant increase for us this year at a tune of $523,000. Every year, the FEC Railroad, they assess their rail crossings along the corridor. And the way it works is that the city is on the hook for the rehabilitation of any of those crossings. That's for any city that's on the FEC railroad tracks. They're responsible for that cost. This year, the cost is significant. We are on the hook for $332,000 in FEC grade crossing maintenance and repairs. So that's nothing that we can do anything about. Additionally, we have to continue with our joint beach renourishment monitoring, as well as start the design for the next project that we'll do. Yes, I know we just completed one, but when you're working with the state, when you're working with the Army Corps of Engineers, we have to start the process now. And in order to do that, we need to fund $220,000 this year in order to do the monitoring of the current project and start to move forward with the next. Additionally, to continue with the Dixie Highway fence, as we know, the City Commission has made it a priority to continue the fence project as a measure of safety for the corridor, as we've had many incidents along the corridor. And that cost this year is to the city is $210,000. Additionally, lobbyist services, which had not increased in, I'm going to be conservative and say 15 years, will be increasing to $84,000 this year. So these are the very high level levels of service, or excuse me, not levels of service, but the high level contractual services and requirements that the city has in order to provide the service level to the city and to the residents at a tune of approximately $11.2 million. So these increases have had to be absorbed within the current budget in spite of the increases to some revenue sources that we're seeing and the various funds to include the general fund, the utility fund, solid waste, and stormwater.
David, I have a quick, just little question. We talk about beach renourishment. I think it's important for us to kind of straighten out some misinformation out there. I saw someone say that while other cities expanded their beach, we were very narrow-minded and tried to keep our beach very thin and narrow, while Boca was wider and others. On a renourishment, you can't make your beach larger than what it originally, there's a point that it's originally at. You can't go beyond that. Is that correct?
That's accurate, Mayor. What is called the template is determined by the Army Corps of Engineers and the Department of Environmental Protection. So you have to do the beach renourishment within that template. You can be significantly fined if you go beyond that template and disturb what they call the hard bottom of the ocean. So
you can't exactly expand our real estate on the beach by just adding more sand, which seemed to be what this individual was suggesting.
that's correct.
Thank you.
It's not really a question, it's more a comment as with respect to this slide here. So law enforcement and fire rescue account for 4.3 million in increases. That's almost 40%, just a tad under 40% of the total, that 11.2 million. With the increases in the home values, the increased costs and the home value, it's kind of a wash. You know, expenses went up, but it was kind of eaten up by the increased property values. So that's a wash. My concern is years going forward, that model is not going to be sustainable. The 2.3 million and the 2.0 million are going to be higher next year, because even though they're capped at what I think their contracts are capped at 3%, if I recall correctly, thereabouts. You know, 3% of 50 million becomes 3% of 55 million, becomes 3% of 60 million. So even though the percentage stays the same, it's a percentage of a higher number. These numbers are going to go up. So when property values become flat or turn negative, this model is not going to work. Or services are going to have to be cut, or this list of increases is going to have to be altered, and the commission is going to have to make hard decisions. This year, we're fortunate that property values have gone up, but in future years, we're not going to be as fortunate, and that's my concern going forward. So are we looking at that possibility going forward? Because it's going, I don't know what year it's going to come, but it will come.
So Commissioner, we are looking at, you know, all costs associated with this. We scrutinize their contract and their contract consideration. And when I say consideration, that's the budget they put forth to us. They call it the consideration letter. That is heavily scrutinized to ensure that it is not exorbitant, that it is within the contract. The contract says that it can increase by 5% for operating expenditures. And there are other caps on things like, I believe it's health insurance, if I'm not mistaken. And then there's some things outside of their control that are not capped. Now they've met their contractual obligation in terms of the increases that they provided for us this year. But you're right, we have to look at ways in which to provide, you know, the law enforcement services and the fire rescue services that the residents expect. And frankly, I've heard from the commission, you know, recently and in the past about increasing service levels. It makes it very difficult to do so when you're trying to absorb the contractual increases that we're seeing year over year in both fire rescue and police. So, you know, there's ways that I think we can look at what our model for revenues and expenditures. But we do need to look at, and this is why we obviously try to keep pace with, you know, one of the revenue sources for fire, which is the fire assessment fee, because the fire assessment fee can pay for 100% of the fire services that are provided by the fire rescue operation. And that allows us to take the pressure off of the ad valorem source of revenue to provide the level of service on the other areas that the general fund supports: general government services, parks and recreation, you know, so on and so forth. So yes, I do agree with you. I think this year, more than most, was a big hit, obviously because of that legislation that came about. I do think that in some respects, we gain efficiencies through these contracts because we're not paying for other services that we might see if these were services that were done in-house. You got to remember, we don't have to have our own investigative unit and detectives and the administration that comes along with providing these services. The expansion of government service that you would have to see if these were our employees, to include, HR, finance, procurement, and these other functions within our general government that would have to support those two major operations. So there are pros, there are cons. We need to maintain the contractual obligations of the Broward Sheriff's Office as it relates to the cost of their services. We need to look at the revenue sources that support these as well. And it is a fine balance. And I appreciate you recognizing that it can have a negative impact on our ability to do other things.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd like to hear from the public going forward at the two meetings is you have two mutually exclusive goals here, which are competing against each other. You have one, which is decreasing the millage rate. But to do that, you're going to have to cut some services along the line. You can't have both. You can't increase services and decrease the millage rate. You can't, not without suffering something along the line. So I'd like to hear from the public as we go forward is if you want to decrease the millage rate, what services need to, where do you think that can be cut? What services out of this list or anywhere else in the budget need to be cut? Or conversely, if we need to add services or expand services, are you okay with a higher millage rate? Those are the two possibilities going forward. I don't think you can have it both ways.
One of our big expenses is police and fire. Other cities, recently there were, for instance, several shark attacks off Long Island. Instead of sending boats out with patrols, which cost a fortune, they used drones and found it 1/5 the cost. I think as technology gets better and better and the use of drones and trained pilots, which is in the process now, will be in the future an aid to our police department and save us money in the long run. Because the eye in the sky is a wonderful thing for tracking criminals, stolen cars, etc. I've watched the demonstration of these devices, both from Sirius Radio and others, and it works. And it's sometimes a lot cheaper than just adding manpower. So we can't just look down the future and say, it's going to cost us more and more. So what do we cut? We have to find ways to get a problem solved without cutting services, without hitting the taxpayer over the head. It's out there. We have to be smart enough to take advantage of it. I don't know if you saw the Sirius Radio car thing with the cameras.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Just very briefly, cars doing 80 miles an hour down Hillsborough Boulevard, the lights green on Military Trail, and you start to go. Your radio comes on and says, hit the brake, because this guy can't stop when the light's red and will T-bone you if you keep going. They're putting it in cars now. They say within 10 years, every new car will have it to avoid accidents. Gee whiz, that's better than just having a traffic control person that we're paying a salary to stand on the corner looking for the guy doing 80 miles an hour down Hillsborough. So technology is in our future, and we have to be smart enough to keep looking for ways to save money, but give good service. And I think it's out there.
Yes, Vice Mayor, and that's a great point. And I think we have developed some significant, we haven't developed, it's already been developed, but we're using some technologies here in law enforcement that have been very helpful in doing what they do. It can't replace, obviously, a police officer, but when you talk about camera systems, shot spotters,
Yep.
We're now looking at the school zone mechanisms. We do use drones. Believe it or not, we actually had someone surrender to a drone because they didn't know what it was. I mean, so these technologies are here. We are using them, and they are a great added benefit and potentially cost reduction to the cost of service. Thank you.
Comment as well. We have a member of your senior staff whose responsibility is to look at these contracts and find ways that we can reduce costs without reducing the service levels. And I know that, he's already found ways to do that. So I really think he's got to look even harder. I know he's doing a great job for us, and, I appreciate everything he does. But, a lot of these things that we're talking about aren't city assets, they're BSO assets. So BSO is finding ways to cut their costs with these drones, with these shot spotters, with all of this technology, but they're not passing the cost reduction to us. They're still increasing our costs. So I think we've got to look at our contract, the services that we're providing, how they're being provided, and how we can kind of change these contracts in a way that benefit the city, but do not adversely affect the services that are being provided by these two vital entities. So hopefully that's a direction that you've been given him, and I'm sure he's been following it, and I'm sure he'll sharpen his pencil a lot more.
So we talked about some of the increases in costs that we've seen and had to absorb for fiscal year 24. In June, we presented a department level budget, and there are some things that have transpired since then. Some cuts that we've had to make, and some things that we have added, mostly cuts, in order to balance this budget. And I want the city commission to understand some of those changes that we may have shown you back in June, but unfortunately we won't be able to maybe pursue this year. First, we reduced some intern positions that were proposed in finance, as well as an administrative support specialist that was going to be shared by public affairs and marketing and the ocean rescue. We're going to look at that need and see how else we might be able to accomplish the administrative support for those two departments or divisions, and maybe use some other creative ways rather than adding staff this year. So I'm not saying the need's not there, but I think maybe there's other ways in which we can accomplish that. We looked at our expenses in summer camp that just completed or will be completed by the end of this week, and realized that we can reduce our costs based off of the historics from this year. We are reducing a pier attendant because I think we can operate with what we have. If you remember, we have, the T portion of the pier down. We've just about completed the pier assessment. I'll be bringing forth to you on September 13th, I believe, or if it's not the 13th of September, it'll be the first meeting in October, which will be information brought back from the consultant on the needs of the pier as it relates to refurbishment, and then some options for the commission to consider as it relates to the opportunity to do some maybe enhancements on the pier, as we will have that opportunity with a pier closure, that an imminent pier closure. So the need for that position, I don't see it at this time. We're going to reduce a mechanic trainee.
David.
Yes.
When you talk about the reduction of the pier attendant, I would just like to ask you respectively to look at that, because there's a lot of things that happen on that pier that nobody in staff is aware of. Personnel isn't enough to be able to watch all of the things. You go on the pier and there is a display board of all the rules and those things. Every one of them, most of them, I shouldn't say one of them, but most of them are broken. Sometimes we end up having to lean on our lifeguards and that sort of thing to actually.
I think the public is having.
We end up leaning on our lifeguards to be able to help with issues that are on that pier. A lot of things. And I don't know that that's a good idea.
I don't disagree with you, Commissioner. I question whether or not, because we bring this position on in October. We will have to advertise for it, go through the recruitment process. If we're successful, in the first recruitment process, we might have somebody on board in maybe 3 months. And I'm just not sure that bringing that individual on, it's likely that if we are successful, we'd probably have that individual on staff for maybe a month or two. I'm guessing, not very long. Let's say about 3 months, okay, before we close the pier. And so that would be, I think, a disservice at this juncture. I'm not saying we don't need the position, but I think once we get the pier back up and running, that would be the appropriate time to bring that on.
And I will tell you, you actually should think about, for the fact that families like to just take their kids out there, walk, take a look on our pier. It's a world famous pier. But I will tell you that there are multiple challenges that are out there. And I think that if it wasn't for the lifeguards who have intervened in certain situations to maintain, and complement the rules that are there, they would actually be worse. But if we're going to have a pier, we need to have our personnel know exactly what's going on and discourage any of the issues that are happening out there that is not in line with what we want. And it happens. How do I know that? And I've called you. I've called you about it.
Mhm.
I've called I fished a pier and there's bad things that happen out there. I feel, if anything, that we should make sure that it's covered to really protect our families and, make sure that it's a good environment that our residents can walk out on the pier with their kids or their wife or whoever and enjoy something that the city of Deerfield Beach is providing for them.
Additionally, we've moved the FAU Research Boulevard project from FY24 to FY25. We budgeted for that initially at $10 million. But we're going to have to evaluate that project and the limits of that project to bring it back down to what the surtax is going to provide for that project. Additionally, there may be some other ways in which we can fund the portions of the project that we may not be able to necessarily afford. So you're going to have the surtax funding that's going to fund a portion of this project. Additionally, we do have the pending sale of 1045 Southwest 11th Way. They may be responsible for portions of that project. And then, of course, we have FDOT who will be doing the 10th Street project, and there may be some harmonization that they need to do at that intersection and then, heading a little bit south on that roadway. So we're going to evaluate that a little bit further, but that's a project that we needed to push back a year. We did keep in the budget the Pioneer Grove project, which is partially funded by surtax, and there's some associated HMGP funding with that for the take care of the flooding issues and things like that. So we have pushed that one forward, but this one we're going to hold off a year. Additionally, I needed to look at some of the major contributors to the general fund in terms of expenditures. I had our deputy city manager work with Parks and Recreation to look at various projects, capital expenditures, so on and so forth, that we could reduce this year, or that could be, reduce next year. And in some cases, we're able to do them this year, and we are, but we were able to carve out about $855,000 in the Parks and Recreation budget. We added the grant contribution that we did this current year to the Boys and Girls Club. So that was added in. Again, we talked about the $1 million increase statutorily required by state law for the employee contribution for public safety employees. So that was $1 million. We talked about the it's $1.1 million increase, the county wastewater debt service that we're going to be seeing every year for the foreseeable future. And like literally this month, we just found out that we're going to have an unanticipated rate increase from the county wastewater of 15%, which equates to approximately $865,000. So we're looking at about a $2 million unanticipated increase in our utility fund caused by the Broward County wastewater component of the fee. So I want to bring that to the City Commission's attention in terms of changes that were made and developments that have occurred since June. We're now going to get over into the portion of the presentation where we take a high level look at the various expenditure categories on the budget. As you can see, it's about a $5 million overall change in the general fund. The proposed FY24 budget in the general fund is $155 million, approximately 156 million, if you add that 164,000. The overall budget is increasing by $16,459,973. I want to point out a couple of things that comprise of the budget, and that would be the capital improvement plan. Capital improvement plan by itself proposes a $7.7 million increase, and that's across all funds. That's the utility fund, the stormwater fund, the solid waste fund, and of course, the general government or the general fund capital improvement fund. Our grants and contributions, our grant funds have an increase this year. So those are grant funds coming in to the city, and that's $2.2 million. And I'll go ahead and just move forward, but I want to just note that approximate $349 million does not include the CRA fund. Moving on to revenue sources. As we discussed, it's approximately property taxes is about $60 million is the proposed revenue, a little bit higher than what I showed you earlier. And that's because we account for delinquencies from previous years. So you see this is a little bit higher than what we talked about earlier, but that's because we're accounting for the potential of recouping delinquent property taxes from previous years. So the overall budget change there is $5.7 million. We are expecting some decreases from the state contribution as it relates to sales tax, public service tax, and communication taxes. So a little bit of decrease there. Again, increase in the fire assessment fee based off of the proposed rate that we have put forth before the City Commission. Franchise fees, licenses, and permits. Again, we see that going down slightly. Local option gas tax, we think we're gonna do better than last year on that. Our charges for services expectations are going up by approximately $7 million. Charges for services, again, are across all funds. So, your utility fee, the charges that you pay for your utility bill, your stormwater bill. And so those are charges for services. If you remember, we did increase those fees in fiscal year 2023. So that's why you can see that court category of revenues increasing. You can see the rest of it here. I won't go, line by line, but I do want to note interfund transfers. Okay. Interfund transfers really are non-revenues. They're not coming from sources of revenue outside the city, but they are revenues from one fund to another fund, or an expenditure from one fund to another fund. So if you think about administrative charges, right? The utility fund pays the general fund administrative charges for services like human resources, procurement, the office of the city manager, whatever they may need. There's a calculation, and those are administrative charges, and those are transfers of money across fund to fund. But you have to account those. This is the way government accounting works. So it looks like here you have a $349 million budget, but just keep in mind that interfund transfers make up about 55 million of that. So just to keep that in mind. Also proposes a use of fund balance of 39 million across all funds. A lot of that is carry forwards, meaning that when in FY 23, if you don't complete a capital project, it drops to the fund balance, comes right back out and goes back into FY 24. But that is required in terms of the way we do governmental accounting. I will show you in future slides what the new use of fund balance for the various funds are as proposed. But I want to explain what that 39 million really is. Moving on. Here is the expenditure category just based off of previous year or the current year to next year. And this breaks it down in a different way. So you can see what it costs the city in terms of overall personnel services, the operating capital, the interfund transfers again, grants and contributions, and then of course, debt service. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go over some broad initiatives that are occurring with the FY24 budget and or will be completed. It's anticipated to be completed with the FY24 budget. So we're looking at obviously the Braithwaite Center and Bezos Academy completion and opening. The budget supports the Tigner Center completion and reopening, West Community Center completion and reopening, Constitution Park Community Center planning. Constitution Park would be after we complete the Tigner Center. Constitution Park really would be the last remaining facility that we need to look at in the near term in order to plan for the future of what that community center should be. It is reached an age in which we need to take a look at that. So we're looking at that one. Completion of our lifeguard stations. We have capital dollars. It had capital dollars in FY23. We have additional capital dollars in FY24 to complete the remainder of those lifeguard stations. We talked a little bit about the fishing pier restoration, and we plan to bring that before the city commission. Currently, we have budgeted that at $4.5 million. We have the ERP implementation, which is ongoing. We have the citywide continuation of the citywide median landscape irrigation improvements for some of our major FDOT owned medians. They're very particular about the landscape materials that they use and having signed and sealed plans. It's a learning experience for me to see what the requirements are for FDOT. If it was a city road, it'd be a much quicker and smoother project process, I promise you. But the good news is that they have approved our ability to go out to bid. We have received those bids. So we'll be bringing something forward to the city commission here soon. Court resurfacing. We did plenty of court resurfacing this year. We're going to continue with that. You had the OMRC gym that we're looking at. We did the outdoor basketball over there. Villages of Hillsborough basketball and tennis and Constitution Park were all part of some of the budget initiatives that we were able to complete. The Central City Engagement Planning and Marketing. I think this Friday is the event that's going to be occurring this Friday is a gleaming example of that plan in action of engaging the community for economic development activity and great things that we hope to see come to the Central City area. Dixie Highway rezoning, we're going to be looking at that based off of the ULL study that we had done about, I'm just going to take a guess, about 2 years ago. Also the continuation of the Dixie Highway fence, continue our partnership with the Historical Society, contributing to the funding of the Butler House restoration. Within stormwater, we have the continuation of the MLK Ave project, Southeast 8th Ave, West Deerfield, which is Deer Run, Crystal Lake Drive drainage improvement, and Northwest 45 Street drainage improvement projects. In Road and Bridge, we have the design for the Southeast 15th Ave Bridge. As you know, we've been working on the 13th Ave Bridge. The 15th Ave Bridge requires design, as we've been talking about, and we've engaged the public several years ago on this to understand, to get an understanding of what their wants and desires in terms of, what we do with those bridges. They were very very adamant about the replacement of that bridge, and we have to just be prepared that as that bridge is currently designed, will change dramatically based off of current design standards. But we'll be going ahead with the design on that. The Crystal Lake Lap project, which is a FDOT funded project, street resurfacing, Pioneer Grove streetscape improvements, and highway lighting upgrades to LED. We're all pursuing. The unfortunate thing with the highway lighting upgrades to LED, we did have surtax dollars in the amount of $800,000 for a particular project. We tried to work with the county surtax folks and more importantly, their legal department to try to use that funding to do an overall LED replacement of all lights on our major arterial roads. Unfortunately, their legal department felt as though that project was too far removed from our original ask. So they denied our ability to do that. But I still see great value in pursuing that project. We're going to budget it at $800,000. However, for every, I think it's linear foot of conduit infrastructure that is good, we get rebates off of that. So I anticipate that the cost of the project will be less than the $800,000. But this is an opportunity to take care and get brand new infrastructure, underground and above ground LED on all of our major arterial roads. Just last night, we heard about some complaints about some of our LED lighting, excuse me, LED lighting on these major corridors. And that's what we're talking about. You know, we're having significant issues with some of the underground wiring. And so I know that it's frustrating for people to see that these things are taking a while, but it's not just going up on a bucket truck and replacing a light bulb. There's underground infrastructure issues that we are having with many of these roadways. So we're looking to address that and nip it in the bud. Within the utility fund, we are kicking off the automatic meter reading project. We are working on our marketing materials right now. We are waiting on the materials to come in. So we'll be replacing all the city, the meters with these automatic meter AMI, automatic meter infrastructure for all the meters out there. Again, this is going to be great for the city and for the public, provides real-time data for us and the residents, will alert us to, you know, anomalies in their water usage to help to locate leaks a lot quicker, notify residents of those things a lot quicker, make sure that the meters are accurate throughout the city. So very excited about that project. We're doing the ammonia and chlorine conversion, also the Floridian well rehabilitation, and we are pursuing that ion exchange project through design, which is something that the city commission approved at a meeting or two ago. So that design will be ongoing throughout the FY24 fiscal year. Within solid waste, we discussed the cart replacement program. So we'll be looking to do that, running brand new garbage carts to all of our residents, replacing the 2 64 gallons with one 95 gallon cart. Again, if there's a resident who cannot maneuver a 95 gallon cart, we will make exceptions. We'll make sure that we accommodate those residents. We did talk about the increase in disposal costs that we're going to see, and we are kicking off as well a compost pilot program. In terms of personnel changes this year, one of the things that we've seen a lot of in previous years is reclassifications. And really that is, we don't have many of those this year. In fact, we don't have any. And the reason why is because we completed a paying class study. And I think we need to live up and to that paying class study. And we need to, you know, honor that. And a lot of years we'd see reclassifications because we had a lot of positions that were out of whack. They weren't in line with the market. They were not necessarily in line with what the position was currently doing. But we do have some personnel changes. And so the first and the biggest one is relocating the transportation division from Parks and Recreation back to Community Services. This is something we did talk about back in June. And so those positions in that division will move under the management of Community Services. We're eliminating a transportation manager position. And those duties are going to be absorbed by the transportation supervisor. I don't think I said that title right, but there is another position that those duties will be absorbed by. We'll be adding a bus driver because that's really the real need that we have there. We have a deficiency in bus drivers, so we want to add a bus driver, and those are the maneuvers that we're making in order to make that happen. We have a vacant grants writer position. We're going to close that. We have, we're going to add a facilities attendant over in community services, and this is to support the new facility that is almost complete. We're adding 2 housing coordinator positions. This is a budget neutral amendment because we have that function currently outsourced. It is grant funded by the various grant funds that we have to support the housing programs. That's a revenue neutral, or excuse me, an expenditure neutral change. We are eliminating a vacant electronic automation supervisor, 1 utility electrician, and a senior mechanic, senior maintenance worker out of environmental services, as well as adding an ERP coordinator, someone who will be responsible for the oversight and management and coordination of all ERP activities as we move forward, and then a facilities technician in Parks and Recreation to help support some of the minor facility repairs that we have within our parks. And so we can turn our attention to that a lot more. As we talk about these budget initiatives, now it's time to turn to how we're going to accomplish that. And so as you see here, this is the general government capital fund projects for this year and the sources of revenue that will support them. So various uses of grants, loan proceeds, and the general fund unassigned fund balance. We talked earlier about the overall use of fund balance across all funds. And so here you can see the use of fund balance for the general fund, or the proposed use of fund balance in the general fund to do these various projects that are in the city's 5-year capital improvement plan for FY24. Taking a look at the major uses of fund balance. So the general fund, it's 14.8. Overall, it's a 4.7 reservation of the fund balance at 3.95 in capital funding, as well as 200,000 for the Historical Society Butler House, and the remainder is simply just contingency. The rest of it is prior year carry forwards. As you can see there, utility fund as well. There is a transfer from the utility fund to the stormwater fund. This is to help offset the cost of the West Deerfield Beach stormwater project. That would be paid by the stormwater fund over time when the project begins. And the stormwater fees that were adopted by the City Commission will support the repayment of that loan. There are capital infrastructure projects of 8.3 million, and then a reduction in the use of utility fund balance in operating this year will be 3 million. So as we've been able to kind of turn the utility fund fees to support the fund more and more each year, we had started to see the use of fund balance to support operating. That is reducing, so that's a good thing. It's doing what it intended to do. And additionally, we'll be looking this year to, and this will come a little bit later, but we've been talking about this. We brought a resolution before the City Commission in a previous meeting recently about use of loan proceeds in the utility fund to support some of these major projects that will occur and that are consistent with the master plan and the funding strategy. Within stormwater, we have just a small use of fund balance for both new and carry forwards at 2.9 million. Road and bridge is new and carry forwards at 1.5, and then other funds is 1.6 use of fund balance. And those would be things like, let's just say like the Parks and Recreation Future Fund, and funding that would be reserved in that funding, and now we're ready to use it for certain projects. Okay. So a little bit more discussion on general fund unassigned fund balance, or otherwise known as reserves. And the distinction there in terms of definition is several years ago, Gadsby required us to change the definition of what that is. So We used to call it reserves. They make us call it unassigned fund balance. So we've got them both here just so there's no confusion. But we just read the last annual consolidated financial report that was released for the city was for the year end and the closure of FY22. And that's what you saw back in June. That's what you saw back in June. Okay. So that was a snapshot in time on September 30th, FY22. So in there, it said that we had a year-end fund balance of 39.2 million. During that presentation, if you remember, we talked about some of the things that were already reserved for that 39 million, which was $10 million in the ARPA funding that was received. And we received a total of 16.2 million in ARPA funding. We were allowed to take 10 million of that for general government revenue replacement. And we continued to assign that to the projects that were already approved by the city commission. So what happened at the end of FY22 is that $10 million fell into the undesignated reserve. And then FY23 got assigned to the various projects that it was meant to fund. So you remove that as well as the mid-year budget amendment that we did this year, and that's $14.8 million. So really what we're looking at as an anticipated FY23 year-end fund balance is approximately $24.4 million. What that does not include is any revenue overages or expenditure reductions that we have for this year that would go into the fund balance as well. So if we have revenues outpacing expenditures at the end of FY23, that amount would go into the fund balance as well. We anticipate there will be a little bit, not an exorbitant amount, somewhere in the range of 1 to 2 million potentially. That would contribute to, the fund balance as well. Additionally, I want to make sure that the Commission understands that that fund balance does not include the $5 million emergency reserve fund, right? And we talked about the emergency reserve fund. We reserve $5 million and we keep that on the side just in case we have, a major natural disaster. The City Commission could always use that for other things should another emergency or need arise. But for the time being, it's held in the emergency reserve, $5 million, and is not included in the 24.4 million. This does comply with the city's current policy on fund balance of having 10% of general fund, minimum of 10% of the general fund operating expenditures plus transfers. I'm going to allow Stephanie to give my voice a break, and she's going to take the next 4 slides. She's going to talk a little bit about debt service.
Can we just go back?
Sure.
One slide, because I know this always gets a lot of attention on the reserve / unassigned fund balance. I mean, my opinion is you can never have enough in reserves. The unknown, I liken it to like my personal savings account. You can never have enough money in your savings account for that rainy day. And being a coastal city in South Florida, that rainy day hopefully never comes, but we have to prepare for when it will come. And so I don't think that we can ever have enough in there because one hurricane, as you saw from the west coast of Florida and the Panhandle, will certainly affect that very quickly. So I'm not really in favor of like moving things around and using those reserves up. I think we need to, be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, but keeping a healthy savings account is never a bad thing. That's just my opinion on this. I know we've gotten a lot of discussion on this before, particularly using some of these funds towards reducing the millage rate and other projects. I know sometimes when I talk to the city manager about specific projects, he's like, don't touch the reserves. We don't want to try and touch the reserves. So I think that's a good policy to live by. So is the 24 million, what would be the 10%? Let me ask this. What would be the minimum 10% number It's 10% general fund operating expenditures. Do we know what that 10% number would be? I know we're over the 10%.
So if I can maybe have Ms. Tinsley do her portion of the project, sit back down, do that calculation, rudimentary calculation for you, and then provide it to me, I can get that information to you.
I mean, whatever it is, we're over it, and that's fine, and I think we should be. But I'm just very leery about spending reserves, because that rainy day, we need to plan for it and hope it never comes, but be prepared for if it does.
If I may,
Go ahead,
Can
Mr.
you-
Mayor, you go first.
thank you. And I'm sorry, I can't see you gentlemen right now, but, look, I've been one that's pounded on this because I've watched our undesignated fund balance increase. I mean, I've been there long enough to see it in the days when it was $7 or $8 million, which is not anywhere we wanted to be. And even then we had people wanting us to pull from it to use it towards something. I do believe that at some point, too healthy of a savings account, some of it needs to go back at some point to the residents. Now, I was pretty adamant about this during last year's budget. I was adamant about this earlier. I believe it was last year regarding this, but I do see that we have less in there than what we've had in the past. We've had to use it for several different items, and we don't really have the amount in there to pull from it to do a significant reduction that would make a lot of sense or have a big impact on the residents without it having a longer term trickle down effect. But I do hope that we are open-minded as we move forward and we see this grow and we get to a point that it's not a moving target, that we do have an idea of which we can take some of that money that's undesignated and actually put it towards a long sustaining reduction in the millage rate.
I listened to both the mayor as well as Commissioner Drosky. The first thing I want to mention, or thank you, is I have asked, I think the last 4 years now, what is the goal? What is the generally accepted principles? And this is the first time I've heard 10% of the general fund balance. So I'm glad we've finally designated what our goal is for this fund. Right now, like I said, you're going to do some calculations, but from what I hear, we're at 17 or 18%. There does come a time where I agree with the mayor as well, that we've got to start looking at what we're going to do with some of these funds. It's great to have a healthy nest egg. I agree with you. And I liken it to a savings account as well. But at the end of the day, you can't take it with you. And so it's great to have that money in reserves for that rainy day that will come. You pay me now or pay me later. But you can't also adversely affect the people that are living now. So at some point, we do have to look at where we're going to earmark some of these funds, making sure that we, comply with our policy, which this, like I said, sounds like the first time I've actually heard we've developed a policy. So I appreciate that. I really do.
And if I can just clarify, Commissioner, this is the existing policy that's in place.
Okay.
So
No, I understand that, but I've asked 2 years ago, I asked 3 years ago, and nobody had an answer. So I don't know when that policy was in or when we got educated on what our goal was, but I'm glad it's been articulated today.
I agree. Right now, I agree with Todd. If we're going to set a limit on the emergency fund, one of you people who think we should cut it, put it on the agenda and let's discuss it and vote on it. I see what happened on the West Coast of Florida, where we have a gentleman living in the village who was wiped out on the West Coast and moved to the East Coast, hoping it would be safer. We are no more safe than the West Coast. If we had a hurricane hit us off the East Coast, a Category 5, who here can tell me what the damages will be for the city to survive? If you can't come up with a number, that'll open our roads, feed our people, clothe them, give them shelter where their homes were destroyed, then we don't have enough. Unless you have a number. If it's figured out, we need 40 million, and let the commission set that as the top. But until somebody sits down and says, if a total disaster hit us, this is what we're going to need in the bank, ready to save lives. I agree with Todd. Right now, we don't have that number. So if you really feel strongly enough, put an ordinance into the commission and let's discuss it. I'd be happy to debate it on its merits. And if I think it's a good idea, I'll happily support it.
If I may, Vice Mayor, that is a project that staff is anticipating to begin. And so we'll be able to have those conversations after we conduct the analysis.
Fine. That's what I'm asking for.
It becomes very difficult to find out what that number is because it's very subjective in nature. What is that number? And when we use terms like we need a healthy fund balance, actually that's true. My colleague is 100% right. You do, but what's that? What is it exactly? But here's one thing that we can say, that with 39 million or 40 million, if you were ever going to do anything for the people, now would be the time. I don't know that you can always look at a number. If that was 50 million, whatever that number is, and say, you know what, because we can always use that argument. But we know now that we're in a position that if you was going to do a little, and I personally, looking at the unassigned balance, I don't see how we can sit there with that much amount of money and say we can do nothing for the resident. I disagree with that. You can do something. I'm not saying that it has to be expensive, but you could do something. You've shown the ability to save. You have something in place should something happen. And if it happens, are we saying that we want to be in a position that whatever the devastation is, we're going to be able to pay for it? I don't think anybody could ever say that you could anticipate exactly what that dollar amount would be. But our residents have been patient, and they see these numbers. I think we're in a position at some point, especially if we continue to see a growth in the unassigned balance, that we can do something for the residents, starting at the beach, going all the way to our District 4. You can do something. You can do something. And if that's in lowering the millage, whatever. But let's say that it's not. Could we do something in utilities? Have we thought it out creatively enough to say, you know what, we can't do it in the millage, but we can do this when it comes to water? I just believe that we are smart enough, we're strong enough, financially sound enough to do something for the residents.
So Commissioner, I do want to point out that you mentioned 39 million in undesignated fund balance. We don't have 39.2 million in undesignated fund balance. Okay, 10 million of that was reserved for ARPA funds, and 4.8 was used for various projects and approved by the City Commission in the mid-year budget amendment this year. So at the end of FY23, we're anticipating a fund balance of about 24.4 million. To speak directly to what the city, or what I am proposing to do with general fund undesignated fund balance in FY24, I'll just go over a few of the projects. Citywide court resurfacing and enclosures within our parks at $50,000. 500,000 towards median improvement projects throughout the city. Citywide park lighting at $300,000. This is something that I believe the commission has asked me to pursue on several occasions. We have several playgrounds throughout the city that are at a grade in which they require replacement. That's about at $450,000. We're looking to pursue the conceptual design and the design process to begin that for Constitution Park Community Center. We're also looking to continue with the ERP implementation and through the ERP contract and with that contractor. 150,000 is being recommended for use on the FEC fence along Dixie Highway. Additionally, the completion of the lifeguard towers that are remaining for FY24. I believe that there are 4 of them, 4 or 5, as well as improvements to the middle school athletic parking lot, which we have continual flooding in, as well as 227,000 to contribute to the safe routes to school around the Deerfield Elementary School area. Lastly, the completion of the West Community Center improvements. So to your question, Commissioner, what can we do with the fund balance? We are proposing to continue with the capital improvement program for FY24. As I did show you earlier, we had some significant budget cuts in order to balance the budget. But this is the proposed use of fund balance in terms of what the residents would be getting with the use of that fund balance. They would be delivered those projects.
So I think, Mr. City Manager, that the question is, how much is too much? And maybe if I ask 2 questions for some follow-up information, maybe that will help me and my colleagues come to a better landing spot on that. One is, does FEMA offer any guidance? If we were to ask FEMA, if category 5 were to hit Deerfield Beach, what would the expected, destruction be? And would they be able to put a price tag on it? Is that something that, or is there a source out there that could help answer that question? Because that may be something that the commission and myself needs going forward to decide that. Let's put some metrics, so put some numbers on the conversation that we're having tonight. So if FEMA comes back and says it's a $5 trillion, just to make up a number, then you probably need a very high reserve. If it's something that's lowered, then it's something that maybe we can discuss. But if there's a source out there that can kind of help us put a number on what we're discussing, that may help the commission. So I don't know if you could look into that, please. That may help, the discussion. The second part is if you could come back to us as well and put a number on what a millage decrease would look like, because I'm not so sure it's going to offer the relief that everyone thinks. A 1 mil is $9.9 million. Let's call it 10 million. There's no way we're going to come up, in my opinion, there's no way we're going to come up with $10 million worth of cuts from the budget that you're proposing. So let's say that we do a $500,000 increase, 5 million. First of all, we got to come up where we're going to cut 5 million. But what does that 5 million look like in form of a rebate to the residents? What about a $250,000? What if you were to do a $250,000 decrease? I suspect that those 2 cuts, a quarter or $500,000, you're probably talking $50 to $200 per person. Just doing some quick math in my head. Is that the true relief that the commission is trying to offer? Is that going to make somebody's budget, a $100 decrease in their taxes over the entire year? I don't know. I just offer that out, but I have a suspicion that the numbers as far as the relief are far lower than what may be anticipated. So if we could put some numbers on that as well, that may help the discussion as well.
Sure. Thank you.
Sense?
Yes. I'm going to switch gears over to Ms. Tinsley. She's going to talk about debt issuance as proposed in the FY24 budget.
Good evening. So I get to talk about the little more fun stuff. So we're going to talk a little bit about the program debt issuance for the general government for the capital fund. So the table that was just shown showed 11.8 million of debt that is being programmed in the general fund, in the general governmental capital projects in order to support many of those projects that are in there. And so some of those projects include the city bridge rehabilitation, which is, I believe, is the design for the 15th Ave Bridge. And in FY 25, there is program 2.5 million in anticipation for the bridge rehabilitation and planning that out. As we said, the ERP for the debt portion is 3.6 million. City street lighting is 800,000. The International Fishing Pier, the restoration for that is estimated at 4.5 right now. And then the Pioneer Grove Corridor, 2.5 match with debt on our share is also programmed in, worked with our consultants to come up with a debt service modeling plan for this. And we did something we call a covenant or a bank note thing, which is non-voted debt. We just chose non-voted debt. Used 20 years as the life and a 5% interest rate. And for the budget of FY 2024, we issue these the debt in the first half or so of FY 2024, half or one payment of debt service interest is due, and we programmed in about $300,000. So that is the interest only payment, which is the first payment that will be due. In FY 25 and forward, there will be the 2 interest payments and the principal payment that will be due each year. So we tried to do it and stretch it out as much as possible. And so if the budget is adopted as planned, I will be coming forward to you all in October with a reimbursement resolution, similar to what it did for the water and wastewater prior to. So what does that do? It allows us a little bit of time to let these projects start and get the ball rolling. It allows me to make those to help pay for some of those expenses that come up with using some of the funding that we do have. So another word that I use when we talk about the reserves or the undesignated fund balance or unassigned fund balances, I use working capital. Those dollars aren't just sitting in the bank somewhere, not being utilized. There's ebbs and flows when it comes to our cash balance, as tax dollars don't come in evenly throughout the year. It comes in at a big hit November, December, and then it trickles off. But yet our expenses are pretty much solid every single month. Got to make payroll every other week. I had to do AP every week. And with AP, there are big hits with those capital projects. And so that's kind of managing that. So just kind of want that in the mindset is that it is working capital. And so one of the things that we are working on, I'm working with my consultants, is updating the fund balance policy, because the fund balance policy states the 10% of government of the general fund plus transfers. That's what it currently states. We're going to work through the numbers and see what is the amount based on the budget. And that's why I can't give you an actual number, because it depends on the size of the budget and our spend. So if our budget is 100 million, the dollar amount that we need is a little different than when you have a $200 million budget. We have capital projects, large capital projects. So it's based on a percentage of whatever your budget is. So this way you have the right level in, so you can make those payments. So at the low point, I can make the payments. I can clear checks. I don't have people having the City of Deerfield Beach checks bounce. Okay. So that's what the reimbursement resolution will come, and then we'll issue the debt, and then we reimburse ourselves for the amount that we paid for. Okay. So then that is the portion for the debt. If we go to the next slide. Right. So this is just a mapping out, I'd like to do some long looking out just past. So this is taking what the 11.8 million along with the equipment capital financing that was planning and layering it over what is our current or existing debt, which is in the green. And so as you see, there is a peak and then it tapers off. Again, this is just a best estimate of when the timing is going to be. There could be some lagging and pushing out a little bit, but that's just the plan. And so right now, what we did is look at what is the 11.8 and the current and existing, and see if we are still within our key debt ratios that we would like to be at. So some of them I pointed out in June, which was the 10-year payout ratio. We were at 50.2%. With this modeling, we still are about at 50%. We don't want to go any lower than that. So that's a good level. Our debt to assessed value is at 0.54%. So our current policy states 2%. So 2% of our debt to assess value. So it's pretty good where we are right now. So that's the only portion of our debt policy that we actually have a ratio to look at. And then our debt service versus expenditure. So we're currently at a little less than 6%, which is really good because the standards at 15% is the high. So we have the capacity to do this. And with our reserve balance to support us being a good risk and getting hopefully a lower interest rate, that's what folks look at when they want to borrow, when we want to borrow from them and they want to loan us any money. Okay. So then that is the general government. Okay, next slide, please. And then this is just a review more or less of the for the debt service for water and wastewater. So 12.8 million for water and wastewater, and we're anticipating also to take that out in the beginning half of FY 2024. Again, these are the projects that they're funding. And so like the ion exchange, the design phase of that is budgeted at 1.8 million. I believe you just approved that, as well as some of these other projects as well, the nanofiltration and chemical line and bulk tank replacement. These are all, plus water and sewer upgrades, Pioneer Grove and FAU Research Park Boulevard. These are ways of us, to me, in a way, giving back to the citizens, getting these things fixed, getting the house remodeled, renovated, so that they have a place that they can live where it's safe. And so here, same thing, 20 years, 5% interest is basically a good model. And so the payment structure, again, already within the budget, the first interest payment of $300,000 in FY24. FY25 will then have the full interest payment, annual interest payment of about $600,000 plus principal payment as well. This debt model is factored within the adopted rate plan that you have adopted. What we didn't factor in was the emergency repair, that increase in the unexpected Broward County bond debt service of $1 million, plus the county wastewater rate increase as well. However, Ms. Sajelnik and myself, working with our consultants and very much committed to staying within the adopted rate plan. And we're working through various structures, ability to manage this debt within and operations within the adopted rate plan. So there's some, we'll be doing some finessing on that, and you'll hear more about that going forward. And so then the next slide, please. And so here's where we looked out, again, taking the current structure and layering in the anticipated debt service. So the darker green is the current existing debt. The lighter green is the junior debt, or is the state revolving loan fund portion. And then the light blue and the dark blue is the borrowings that are anticipated going forward, going out. And so this structure will be within the rate plan that has been adopted by commission. If there aren't any questions on that, I can turn it back over to City Manager, Mr. Santucci.
Okay, I'm going to briefly go over the capital improvement plan for FY24 and the various projects that are associated in the various funds and bond areas. So we have the general obligation revenue bond projects that are continuing. This year, the proceeds, loan proceeds for that project continue at $1.8 million, and the Tigner Center expected to be at $449,000, as well as the City Hall Hardening and Resiliency Program through, which is combined with the local hazard mitigation grant program at $4.3 million. That is for City Hall improvements for flood resiliency and hardening. Next slide, please. I won't read all of these, but I will display these and just highlight a few, leave them up for the commission to see and answer any questions that you may have. But we did talk about some of these projects, which was the 15th Ave Bridge, ERP, the International Fishing Pier, the Pioneer Grove project, surtax funded at $5 million. The general government capital improvement plan for this year is $20 million. Next slide, please. Utility fund, approximately $9 million in projects. This one does not include the $18 million ion exchange water treatment process improvement that we will replace the line softening process with. We'll probably see that one, that expenditure come in FY25. Within stormwater, we talked about the initiatives already that would be occurring in stormwater previously. These are the funding amounts associated with those various projects. Also within the capital improvement plan, from a vehicle replacement perspective, these are the various vehicles in the various funds in which the capital improvement plan supports. Just hold it for a minute. Let's go back for 1 minute. Okay, thank you. So future considerations that I wanted to talk about with the commission and some things that we're looking at, through FY24 and into FY23 and beyond. But we can see the capital investment needs of the city, and we have several things going on now and planned as we move forward from the budget perspective. But the public safety master plan, we talked earlier about the service levels of public safety, and how do we know we have the right service levels? There's ways to decrease that. Quite frankly, I think what we're going to find through the public safety master plan is we're going to learn about what we're going to need for service levels going to the future, and what the facilities, our public safety facilities, will require in order to support that level of service as we continue to see population growth throughout South Florida and in Deerfield Beach. We've got some design plans coming forward with the Constitution Park. We're moving forward with conceptual design of what this area right here, this downtown development, can be and what it can potentially become as far as a catalytic project for Pioneer Grove development in its entirety. So these types of projects are going to require funding sources beyond what we have today. And we'll have to talk about general obligation bonds in order to fund that caliber of expenditure. When you're talking about parks and recreation facilities, general government, city hall facilities, fire stations, police stations, these are beyond what we can support currently. We talked about the Central City redevelopment, and I do believe that if we put our best foot forward in capital infrastructure, which we are through the Pioneer Grove Stormwater Project, through the HMGP project just around here in City Hall, as well as planning for the design of this area with the city assets and land that we have, it will be catalytic in order to have Pioneer Grove become the reality that we would like to see, and make it no longer just a vision of what we want to see in terms of development down here. We'll continue to move forward with the sale and the development approvals for 1045 Southwest 11th Way. Just keep in mind, we haven't sold the property yet. The sale is contingent upon us getting through the site plan and zoning approvals that are required, and we're working with the developer through that process right now. But until he gets through all that, the sale is not final. We don't have $6.5 million in the bag. Code compliance. We will see the code compliance contract expire at the end of this year. So that'll be the 10-year contract with no more renewals after that. And we're going to have conversations about what the city commission expects in terms of level of service and what's going to be, necessary in order to provide that level of service that the commission has an expectation of. Remember, that contract at 8.5 years has not changed from a cost perspective, other than adding an additional body, but the cost per those bodies has not changed in 8.5 years. So we will most likely see a cost increase, certainly for the level of service that we have today, definitely if we want to increase the level of service, and only decreases if we decrease the level of service that we than what we have today. The fire assessment fees, as proposed, they are recapturing at a rate of about 83% of the 100% rate that we can. Remember, the last study that we did said that to recapture 100% of the fire-related services, the rate should be $374. We recapture below that rate. That's at the discretion of the commission, of course, but there is opportunity there. We will be moving into contract negotiations, full-blown contract negotiations with both of our unions, IUPAT and PMSA. Those do expire in September of 2024, so we will begin contract negotiations sometime in the new calendar year. And then, of course, we are seeing decreases in the rate of inflation, but they still remain high. There is certainly an uncertainty there. We are still seeing significant supply chain issues. It is impacting the timeliness of our capital projects. I've seen where windows are on back order, affecting our lifeguard stations. I've seen where ceiling tiles are on back order for the Center for Active Aging, affecting the timeliness of that project. So this is something that the nation is still dealing with, and we're seeing it here locally. And hopefully that fixes itself here soon, but those are still concerns as we move forward with these projects and these initiatives moving forward, that the costs are just going to increase. We've recently seen cost estimates that will be presented to the CRA board as it relates to the Sullivan Park project. And even in those cost estimates, they're anticipating significant increases down the road, depending on when we start these projects. So these are the things that we have to deal with. We all want to get these projects done. We want to see them move forward, but cost increases are a real thing. Next slide, please. So in summary, the recommendation to the City Commission is maintaining the operating millage rate at 6.0018 mils. as well as the required debt millage rate to a total of 6.2538 mils for FY 24 and a fire assessment fee of $310 per ERU or residential unit. So that keeps the millage rate unchanged for FY 24. It reduces the debt millage rate, and it increases the annual fire assessment fee by $15 for a residential unit. Next slide, please. So this slide I want to go through, take a little bit of time, and Commissioner Drosky, I will address your question here. Correct. So I had it right here. Good, thank you. So here we go. I wanted to give the city commission and the public a little bit of comparison. Now we're using the current taxable values for FY 23 and FY 24. So we can see the effect of the millage rate that we are recommending, as well as the fire assessment fee on the average taxable value for City of Deerfield Beach condo owners and City of Deerfield Beach single family residencies. So with a condo, just going down the line, the taxable value currently is about $117,700. Giving the typical exemptions of $50,000 and not including things like permanently disabled, widows, veterans, those sorts of exemptions, which is $50,000. The final taxable value, meaning the value of the property that is used to determine millage, is about $67,700. Okay. The ad valorem taxes based on the recommended millage rate for FY 23 would be at the current taxable value would be $425.33. For FY 24, the city's tax portion of the tax bill for this resident would be $423.82, or $1.51 less than this current year. With the fire assessment fee, with the recommendation of an increase of $15, that gives the annual tax and fire assessment increase to the resident for fiscal year 24 of $13.49. So let's look at single family residencies. And as I explain that, I'll just go a little bit quicker. Taxable value for FY 23 and 24, we're going to use the current taxable value. We're going to give the typical exemptions that are provided. So we have an average taxable value within the City of Deerfield Beach of $174,000, which means the value used to determine the taxes due to the city. You apply the millage rate, and the taxes due in FY 24 are $1,088.16, or $5 less than the previous year. You add the $15 increase to the fire assessment fee, and you're looking at a $10 increase in taxes over last year. And the question was asked, what does a half mil look like? What does a quarter mil look like in reduction? Well, a quarter mil reduction to the city looks like $2.5 million. To the single family, to the typical Deerfield Beach single family residency, at this average taxable value, it's $44 decrease. $2.5 million decrease to the city ad valorem tax revenues, $44 decrease to the average taxable value. At half a mil, that's approximately $5 million decrease in city revenue and approximately $87 decrease in taxes to that single family residency at the average tax value. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentation. I greatly appreciate the city commission's time, the excellent questions that you asked, frankly, some of them challenging, but very great questions. Very happy once again to provide you with this proposed balanced budget for FY24. And I'm here to address any additional questions you may have, comments from you or the public. Thank you.
Commissioners? Since I can't see you guys, maybe I'll start with District 4. You have any comments or questions?
No, no further questions.
District 3,
No questions.
District 2,
None.
District 1.
No questions.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone from the public that care to comment or have any questions that we might be able to answer? That'll help us for our future budget presentations. I know it's a lot of information.
Mr. Schnetsky's coming to the podium.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm Daniel Shinetsky, 34 Keswick B, Deerfield Beach, Florida. I've done some research. I basically found Deerfield Beach's report card. This was offered, and it's public knowledge, and it's offered by the Florida Municipal Loan Council. What they have something called, it's called the Fitch ratings. It's basically the credit rating of the cities in Florida. And I'm just going to give some of the ratings for Deerfield Beach. I'll make it known. The rating is called the IDR. It's the Deerfield Beach Issuer Default Rating. Deerfield Beach General Government Rating, AA. And again, this is public knowledge. You can look it up yourself. It's called a Fitch report. Deerfield Beach General Obligation Unlimited Tax, AA. Deerfield Beach Non-Ad Valorem Revenues, AA. Outlook, stable. Now I'm just going to give a little bit analysis of the Fitch credit report. It reflects Deerfield Beach's strong operating performance and high level of financial flexibility, bolstered by growth in reserves and a notable increase in taxable assessed values since fiscal 2013. And again, this is from August 14th, 2023. The city has solid expenditure flexibility when considering costs associated with debt service, retiree benefits, and staffing. The city's long-term liability, LTL, burden associated with direct and overlapping debt is low relative to its resource base and is expected to remain low. The city is well positioned to maintain a high level of fundamental financial flexibility through economic cycles, benefiting from its superior gap closing capacity, reflecting strong reserve levels, legal revenue raising capacity, and a solid expenditure flexibility. In conclusion of this report, the city's financial and economic performance remains strong, with continued tax base expansion following some moderate pandemic-related impacts. So basically, I feel, let's give credit where credit's due. Deerfield Beach government, I feel, is a strong team consisting of the commissioners, the mayor, and the Deerfield Beach governmental staff, and most specifically managed by, I feel, an excellent city manager, Dave Santucci. The city manager manages a budget of annual $320 million, and he oversees an endless number of city services, everything from building services, coastal waterway management, community redevelopment agency, economic development. So I think, can I have another minute?
Yes.
I feel that we have a AA rating right now, but I feel that we can strive to get that AAA rating. And I feel that we have an excellent team to go for it. And I think that's something that we should strive for, but let's give credit where credit's due for an excellent effort by the city manager, by the commissioners, and the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room coming up?
No.
No, sir.
Okay. Gwen Clark Reed.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Good evening. Gwen Clark Reed, 1430 Southwest Sixth Way, Deerfield. I just have a question about the CRA and in going over the staffing chart. I noticed that one of the positions in the CRA, it just says that only 50% of that position is paid by the CRA. I'd like to know why the CRA is not paying fully for their staffers. That's one of my questions. The other question is that, well, it was based on the flow chart that was presented in the budget, which has changed now because of the changes that have been made in staffing. And I think my questions were answered there. But I really would like to know why the CRA doesn't pay for their own fully for their staff. And why is it that they're only paying 50% for one of their staff persons? And this new ERP, is that something that's going to change the way technology is used for those various departments in the city? And if so, what protections are we putting in to our system that we are not going to be hacked by the AI community that's out here? If the city manager can tell me what protections are there for our infrastructure.
Thank you, Gwen. We'll get some answers for you at the end.
Thank you.
Phone number ending in 137.
Hi, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
My name is Dan Hers, and my address is 330 Southeast 19th Avenue. Before I get to comment on a lot of what Mr. Santucci said, I don't want to forget this, so I just want to mention it right up front. I heard Mr. Santucci say that he is going to fund $200,000 to the Historical Society, which, as I said yesterday, I'm in favor of. But I didn't quite get the information on what is Mr. Santucci doing about the prom, and did Mr. Santucci leave the $15,000 cut to Juneteenth in place? And because I know I'll be ignored, maybe Commissioner Preston can follow up and get a straight answer from Mr. Santucci on that. So I want to get into some of the things that Mr. Santucci said, and instead of going into all the...
Mr. Hers, I'm going to pause you for a moment. I don't think you've ever had a situation in which you have been ignored. As a matter of fact, we've tried to set up meetings with you to sit down and answer many of your questions. So I don't know why you feel you're ignored, but I think that's getting into a personal level, and it's not something that we look to do here.
Fair enough. I will not talk about that ever again. What I do want to talk about, though, is finally, after much asking, David Santucci has finally tipped his hand, and we can now understand exactly what his philosophy is. His philosophy is painfully obvious now. He wants to find project after project after project to spend money on. And when it comes to the taxpayers, that's never a priority of his. So the taxpayer comes last. There's always going to be projects that can be funded. You can always find money to spend. But what's so fascinating to me is that in Mr. Santucci's performance evaluation, it was made crystal clear to him that one of his goals was to reduce the operating millage rate. I know he has not forgotten that. And so isn't that a sign that the commission has given him a clear direction of what his priorities should be? And so I can only come to the conclusion that Mr. Santucci has chose to ignore the will of the commission and go and find, again, project after project after project to spend the excess funds on. Now, if the commission wants to change their priorities from Mr. Santucci, that's fine. Of course, you have the ability to do that. But the last time that you guys set out goals for his performance, you told him what you wanted. And he's not following what you told him to do. So I figure I can go into all the numbers and everything, but in reality, the whole thing comes down to that question. And if you want to, spend some time on something that's very worthwhile, I would zero in on that. And maybe you can get a straight answer from Mr. Santucci about that, because that's really the crux of this whole matter. Now, just a couple things in general. You had mentioned,
Mr. Hers, your time is up. Would you like another
minute?
minute?
I have the extra minute?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, so Mr. Santucci went into all these different examples of all the expenses, but he failed to go into any, other than the property tax revenue going up, he didn't go into any detail about all the extra money that the city is receiving. So if he really wanted to do a fair and balanced presentation, he would have talked about that. And I'm not going to waste the few seconds that I have left going over. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. So the other thing, though, is even a 5% reduction in the millage rate, that would be significant to a lot of people, Commissioner Drosky. And unless you can tell me that you've actually seen everybody's budget in the whole city, I don't know how you can say that maybe to some person that $100 and $200 will make a difference. It probably won't make a difference to you or I, but I bet there's some people out there who could really use that extra money, Commissioner Drosky, and you're supposed to represent everybody.
Mr.
So
Hers,
please
you're
keep that
actually
in
supposed,
mind.
Mr. Hers, I'm going to shut you down because you need to address the entire commission as a whole instead of calling out individuals. All right. We'll answer your questions and even some of your questions you've submitted in a moment. Is there anyone else? Anyone else?
No, sir, there's not.
Okay, thank you. Well, look, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to do this, and I thank you for the presentation. I know this gives us a good peek into looking into this. To answer Gwen Clark Reed's question, the city manager can probably help me with this a little bit more, but this is a practice that's been going on for years. We have a CRA member that works as 50% of their time is CRA, 50% is economic development, and that economic development is not just for the CRA, it's for the entire city. And I think this is the model that we've had in place since we brought in, I think, going back to Kevin Klopp. Is that correct, Mr. Santucci?
You're accurate on the reason why there's a cost share between the CRA and economic development. I do not know at this time how far this goes back, but it does go back for several years.
Can you talk about the ERP that we were talking about?
Absolutely, yes. The ERP is dramatically going to change the way in which the city government works with technology, particularly in the areas of human resources and finance. This is a huge backbone system for the city. It will also improve our interactions with customers and the way in which they conduct business with the city. We did look at several different technologies, and one of the major key factors in the decision of which technology vendor to go with was security of the system. And so we are confident that we're moving forward with a tried and true government ERP system that has a track record of strong security.
Okay, thank you. As far as some of the other questions that were brought up, I think there seems to be some misconception that Mr. Santucci is the one who pulls the budget out of his own ideas and just brings it forward, and he's the one that controls the budget and has the final say over it. It's all of us as a commission. These directives and these projects that come forward are commission directed. And in the end, while you may like to attack personally our city manager, it doesn't seem to make sense because we are the ones, the five of us, that make this decision for the residents as far as what the priorities are. I think it was very clearly spelled out, the reasons why it's difficult to lower the operating millage, because you see with the increases in services that we normally haven't been at the levels that they're that the costs have gone up to exceed what we've gained here. And yes, I do believe, and I, like I said before, I think, you know, there is going to get to be a point where you can pull from the reserves to go towards a reduction for people, but at what cost? At what small savings? Because that seems to be what we're doing. I'm watching someone running around chasing nickels, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think in the end, look, our reserves are not as high as I thought they were going to be. I thought they were going to be higher, which would have given us some room to be able to make some changes. Things pop up. We had $4 million in damage to our pier, which is not covered by FEMA because it wasn't declared a state of emergency. These types of things pop up. But there is some misinformation that's being spread out there, and it's a shame, because to say that our stormwater fee has gone up by 27%, that's not accurate. It's gone up by 23.4%, and there hasn't been a change there in 5 years. Fire assessment's gone up by Mr. Hurst has gone around saying it's 10%. It's a 5% increase, I believe, is what the commission had settled on, even though we put a cap that is higher, but it's been very clearly stated what the goal of the commission is. When it comes to solid waste and the garbage fee and the water fee, we haven't had an increase. 15 years in the garbage fee and the water fee, I believe it's been 14 years, not a single increase. It is ludicrous to expect what are enterprise funds, and the definition of an enterprise fund is very clear. An enterprise fund is a government fund that sells goods and services to the public for a fee. The goal of an enterprise fund is to make the entity self-sustaining. The very audits that Mr. Hers and his friends have asked for, and some of the residents have asked for, that were done by the state, one of the few things that they brought forward to us is that there is a concern that our funds, which we've been pulling from the general fund to supplement, need to be improved. They need to be more self-sustaining. So that's why there's an increase. The first increases we've had in a very, very, very long time, and they're minimal. So, you know, to answer some of the other questions that were submitted to us, does the city feel that every dollar they reduce the operating millage by, they must cut a dollar from an existing program? Pretty much, yes. If you want to go ahead and take a small amount of the reserves, which at this point I don't recommend, and we see the insignificant dollar amount it is for the average person, I don't think it's worth it to do that. Not where we're at right now. Is the proposed general reserve for fiscal 2014 the highest in this history? The general reserve the highest in history of Deerfield Beach? No, it's not. And that was clearly stated. Does every fund, the stormwater fund, water and sewer fund, have to be self-sustaining? As we talked, I just said, yeah, it does. Can the city borrow some of the money it knows it will receive for $6.5 million when the FAU land parcel closes to lower the operating millage rate for fiscal 2024? We don't have that money. The sale is not complete, and it's contingent on all site plans and zoning approval requirements. The city hasn't sold the land yet. We have the permission to move forward, and we are. Safe to say it is not anticipated for approximately 18 months. So how do you make up $6.5 million the following year if you raise the millage rate back? Is that what we're going to do? Raise it 1 year just so we can get a little tiny savings? We're going to have to make up that $6.5 million we borrowed from. It doesn't make any sense. Does the city think there's a better steward that the city think that it's a better steward of the taxpayers' money than the taxpayer himself? I would say that it really depends on the taxpayer. I'm sure there's some brilliant minds out there that would do a great job and be excellent stewards. There are some people, I don't know, admins of certain websites that have personal bankruptcies that I don't think are going to be very good stewards of the money. So it's a difference of opinion, but I will say this. A typical requirement for a CFO is a bachelor's degree in accounting, finance, business administration, and that's all required. 10 years of accounting experience and 5 years of management experience are required. 36 or 60 months professional level experience in governmental accounting. Governmental accounting is very different than regular accounting. Comprehensive knowledge of public finance and accounting principles and practices, including fiscal forecasting and auditing of public accounts. And they have to have a CPA certification. Yes, I would say that those qualifications, not every taxpayer in the city of Deerfield Beach can meet. When you plan on doing with the $800,000 in extra property tax revenue funds that Marty Chiara said the city will receive in fiscal 2024, compared to fiscal 2023, which is 14% higher than the city projected, the 6.4 million you're talking about is gross. It needs to remove the CRA funds, delinquencies, and early payment of taxes. That leaves you about 5.77 million net. And as you saw, what has gone up for us in cost wipes most of that out, if not all of it. Does the city feel that the one-time reduction in the operating millage rate in fiscal 2024 will lead to expectation that the millage rate will need to be lowered every single year? I don't know if that's what the expectation is, but the request seems to be every single time. But here's what I do know. And we know this because, as Mr. Shinetsky brought up, Fitch is a big deal. It was a hot button ticket for a lot of the friends out there who are critics of the city who wanted to know why our Fitch rating dropped. Our Fitch rating is excellent. You don't hear them touting what's happening with it. I can tell you governmental agencies in a lot of these accounting areas are going to look at the fact that if you start yo-yoing your millage rate just to give a short-term savings one year, only have to rise it up the next year, it's not fair to the taxpayers, number one, and it's not a good sign to some of these agencies that take a look at us. Certainly some of the lenders or anything like that. So it's not a good policy. It's a different philosophy, but to me, it's not a good policy to start yo-yoing one year from the next. And I've been there and done it. I've watched us when we first put in our utility tax, we lowered our millage rate by an entire mill. Now at the time that was valued at about $3.5 to $4 million. I'm like, now it's at almost $10 million. It was easier to do, but then we had to raise it right back up the next year and everyone went ballistic, including Mr. Hers. Now, the millage rate is used to calculate ad valorem taxes. So one of the things that was talked about and a question that we had is it possible for the city of Deerfield Beach to be simultaneously strong enough to issue $45 million in bonds to modernize our water delivery system, but weak enough that it's imprudent to lower the operating millage rate for fiscal 2024. It's an apples to oranges comparison. The millage rates used to calculate your ad valorem tax revenue and the general fund revenues. The millage rate, 1/3 of your total bill, the city's of your total tax bill. The bottom line is these are enterprise funds. They need to be self-serving. So no, the $45 million should not be coming out of our general fund. It should be coming out of our enterprise funds. That's what we've been asked to do. That's what we're looking to do. We did pull some of our reserves out to lower the impact of the water rate increase we had by taking some out of our undesignated reserve to put that in to help lower the impact of the first time in 14-year water rate increase we did. We were able to do that. I guess that doesn't seem to be enough. But look, the bottom line is the impact on this is relatively small. You see the numbers that say where we're going to be at the end and what this impact is for the average resident. Now, if you're not homesteaded in the city of Deerfield Beach and you have a bunch of properties that don't have that luxury of having a homestead exemption, no, you are taxed at a different rate. And certainly with the increase in values of your property that you have, you're going to have to pay a different rate. But if you're homesteaded and you're someone who's been here for a while, the impact is very small. I hope this answers all the questions that have been submitted that we've been accused of ignoring. That hasn't been the case. Certainly, we've made the city manager available to sit down. That doesn't seem to be what someone wants to do, but at least hopefully we've answered the questions. I hope that's enough time. Since we closed it to the public, we'll go ahead and
Mayor,
yes.
There were a few questions related to some specific items in the budget. Would you like me to address those?
Please.
Okay. There was a question about pre-prom, excuse me. The city's not canceling pre-prom. The city is looking to support pre-prom with in-kind services, and we are looking to work with the school on them to continue to support and continue to increase the support that they're providing to the event. Last year, we did it at Quiet Waters. We were not charged a fee for the use of Quiet Waters. They were very good to us and they were very good partners on this particular event. We can provide in-kind services like the stage and various items that they will need. But the school came forward last year and they provided security with their security folks. And I believe our school resource deputies were out there as well. And we had that type of support. But I do believe that a prom event is really geared towards the support of the high school. And we want to make sure that partnership is there. We want to work with them throughout the year to make sure that they are able to do pre-prom, and we want to provide them the in-kind services that they need in order to hold that event.
Is the money that we have budgeted enough to make sure that pre-prom event goes on should the school board fail or not provide anticipated funding?
Because it's in kind, we don't have an associated budget with it.
Yeah.
However, there are some things that I think belong to the event that do have a cost to them. For instance, like a DJ, but we're talking about a high school here. I find it very hard to believe that throughout an entire high school, we won't be able to find a DJ or somebody who can DJ. We have the Teen Center program that provides DJ programming. The Boys and Girls Club has a DJ program. I think there's plenty of resources to provide those types of things that we'll need in order to ensure that event takes place.
Okay.
We talked about, there was a question about Juneteenth. The funding for Juneteenth does remain again at, as proposed within the budget at $45,000. I did talk recently about the fact that when we went through COVID, the Juneteenth, and I don't know the exact number, but was significantly less than what it is today. And we were unable to do the MLK event because of COVID. We had that Omicron, I think it was the Omicron, it was called, spike. And so we took all the money from MLK and we put it into Juneteenth. We maintained that for a few years in order to try to boost Juneteenth up. And I think we were very successful at that this year. We slightly reduced the budget on Juneteenth. We are hoping for increased sponsorships for that event. We've already seen community partners, meaning businesses, come forth and say that they want to support the city more with particular events, particularly in the District 2 area, as these businesses are in District 2. And so I suspect that we'll see increased sponsorships to offset this. I also want to note that this budget does include an increase for both the MLK festivities and the Black Heritage Banquet at a tune of somewhere between $11,000 to $12,000 as well. So hope that answers that question.
Thank you.
You looking for a motion?
I think so.
Motion to close.
We have a motion to adjourn from the vice mayor.
Second.
Second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Staff, thank you very